The research vessel Tsar floated quietly in deep space, far from any known star. On board, the alien crew worked silently, focused on their strange new subject, a living human, captured from a small planet called Earth. Dr. Varnock, the lead scientist, stood beside the observation chamber. His 4 green eyes blinked slowly as he stared at the human. The creature looked weak, soft skin, small muscles, no natural weapons, and only 2 arms and legs. How did this species even survive? Varnock thought. The human sat on the floor of the cell, silent and calm. His name was not known. He refused to speak. Even after weeks of tests, torture, and scans, he said nothing. He just stared back with those strange round eyes, cold, focused. Varnock turned to his assistant, a young alien named Relka. "What's the latest scan?" Varnock asked. "Still no clear data," Relka replied nervously. "Their internal systems are chaotic. Their organs change under stress. The immune system attacks everything, even our nanobots." Varnock hissed. That was not normal. Most species followed logical biology. Their bodies had patterns, predictable, safe. But humans? They were random, unstable, wrong. Last week, they had injected the human with a chemical that was deadly to 10 other species. He should have died in seconds, but he didn't. Instead, he fell unconscious for 6 hours. Then his body healed itself. The cells repaired. The liver grew back, the bones fixed. The human stood up and smiled. Varnock had seen many things in his 200 years of science. But this was different. He opened a communication log. Log entry 72, subject 001, human. The human was exposed to a lethal dose of toxin Z41. Recovery time, 6.2 hours. No permanent damage, no fear response. Subject appears amused. Varnock looked again at the human through the glass. He whispered to himself, "Something's off about these creatures." Later that night, Varnock entered the chamber for a close scan. The human was chained but awake. "Why won't you speak?" Varnock asked, stepping closer. The human tilted his head, then finally answered in a quiet voice, "Because you wouldn't believe me." Varnock was stunned. This was the first time the subject had spoken. "Try me," Varnock said. The human smiled. But it wasn't a friendly smile. It was cold. "You think we're weak because we bleed easily, because we look soft. But you're wrong. You see scars and think they are damage. We see them as memory, evolution." Varnock felt a strange chill in his bones. He had no idea what that meant. "What are you?" he asked carefully. The human leaned forward, his eyes locked on Varnock. "We are pain. We are chaos. We are survival. You study us because you don't understand us. But here's the truth. Even we don't fully understand ourselves." The lights flickered in the lab. For a second, everything went dark. Then a red alarm flashed. "Security breach in Lab Sector 4. A voice shouted. Varnock turned quickly. He saw camera footage. Another human had escaped. No one knew how. The guards were down. One was missing a hand. The escaped human had used it to unlock a control panel. They weren't just surviving. They were thinking. Planning. Varnock returned to the observation room. His heart, or what aliens called a heart, beat faster than usual. He looked again at the human, still chained, still sitting. "How did your friend escape?" he asked. The human looked up. "Escape? You think this is about escape?" Varnock frowned. "What do you mean?" The human stood up, pulling slightly on his chains. "We're not trying to escape, Doctor. We're just learning, watching, waiting. You brought us into your ship." He paused. "You made the first move." The lights flickered again. The power dropped for 5 seconds. When it came back, the human smiled. "Now it's our turn." Varnock stepped back. His fingers shook. The scan machines around him suddenly failed. The AI went silent. The doors locked on their own. Something was happening. Something bigger than he had expected. They thought humans were test subjects. But maybe they were the experiment. Captain Surak stood at the edge of the med lab, staring at the reinforced observation glass. Behind it, Subject 001, the human, sat calmly, blood dripping slowly from a cut across his forehead. He looked like he had just survived a crash, but his breathing was steady. His pulse was strong. His stare unbroken. The lab was quiet, except for the faint hum of machines. Even the other crew members were silent now. Something had shifted. Something had changed after the incident last night. The human's words echoed in Surak's mind over and over again. You made the first move. It wasn't just a threat. It was a promise. The problem wasn't just one human anymore. It was the fear that maybe all of them on that little blue planet were the same. 3 more subjects had arrived today. Each one captured from different regions of Earth, different genders, different ages. And yet they all showed the same terrifying trait. They wouldn't die. One of them, Subject 004, had been exposed to temperatures that could freeze most species into solid rock. She survived it with only minor skin damage. Subject 005 was injected with a neural blocker that paralyzed most lifeforms within seconds. Instead, he had bitten through his own tongue to keep moving. Subject 006 had a broken spine after testing. The impact chamber. Everyone expected him to never walk again. He stood up 12 hours later. Dr. Varnock had stopped speaking much since last night. He simply watched the data, occasionally whispering notes to himself. He no longer believed this was science. It was something else. A discovery they never should have made. Surak approached the main table where Varnock sat, staring at the scan of Subject 1's organs. The liver grew back. That's not new, Varnock said flatly. Surak crossed his arms. That's already insane, Doctor. Varnock nodded slowly. No, what's insane is, we removed part of his brain. Surak stiffened. And? He asked, careful not to raise his voice. Varnock finally looked up. There was no excitement in his eyes anymore. Only fear. He regenerated parts of the neural tissue. New neurons formed. His brain rewired itself in ways we've never seen. In ways our computers can't explain. He's not just healing, he's becoming something else. They turned toward the glass again. Subject 001 suddenly looked up. As if he had heard them. He smiled. That smile sent a cold wave through the entire room. In most alien species, damage was simple. You cut, they bleed. You hurt, they break. You poison, they die. But not these creatures. They didn't stop. They didn't stay dead. Even when they should. There was another report from the lower deck. Subject 004 had gone into cardiac arrest during the stress test. Her heart flatlined. Medics came too late. They called it. 10 minutes later, her heart started beating again on its own. No drugs, no assistance, no defibrillator. She came back. Varnock reviewed the footage 3 times. Her eyes opened slowly. No panic, no fear. Just a deep, calm breath. Like waking up from a nap. And then she spoke. You thought that would be enough? When the guards tried to restrain her, she broke one of their arms. Not out of rage, but like it was easy. Natural, like she had done it before. The question no one wanted to ask out loud was this. Were they designed like this? Or did they make themselves this way? It didn't matter anymore. The truth was simple now. They weren't built to die. They were made to keep going, through pain, through damage, through death. As if nature itself had been forced to build something that refuses to give up. Surak finally broke the silence. What do we do now? Varnock didn't answer, because there was no protocol for this. No training. No plan. You prepare for war. You prepare for monsters. You prepare for weapons. But no one prepares for something that should be dead. And simply chooses not to be. Subject 001 stood up. Suddenly in his chamber, every eye in the room turned to him. He walked to the glass, dragging his chains behind him. There was dried blood on his shirt, bruises on his arms, and burns on his hands. Still, he stood tall. He looked directly at the captain. And for the first time, he spoke clearly, slowly, like he wanted each word to echo. You think strength is power. You think death is defeat. He pressed a bloodied hand against the glass. But what if we never stop coming? That night, 7 crew members reported vivid nightmares, dreams of falling, of burning, of fighting something that would not die, something that got back up, every single time. By morning, Subject 006 had vanished from the lower chamber. The door showed no signs of force. And on the wall, written in what looked like blood, was a message. We die differently. And just like that, the lab stopped calling them subjects. They began calling them warnings. It had been 11 days since the humans arrived. The alien vessel Tsar no longer felt like a ship of science. It felt like a prison. Not for the humans, but for the crew. The lights were dimmer now, the halls quieter. Conversations turned into whispers. Fear hung in the air like a fog that wouldn't clear. It wasn't because of the damage the humans had caused, though they had caused plenty. It was the change no one could understand. The humans weren't escaping. They weren't even fighting. They were evolving. Every test, every scan, every injury, instead of breaking them, it improved them. Each setback seemed to teach them something new, not just mentally. Physically, Subject 001 had broken a rib 2 days ago during a pressure test. Today, that rib had not only healed, it had become denser, stronger. Subject 005 was blind in one eye after a flash grenade trial. This morning, his vision returned clearer than before. And Subject 004. Subject 004 was terrifying. When she arrived, she was quiet, unresponsive. She didn't speak, didn't resist. Just watched, but something had changed. Slowly, she began asking questions about the ship, about the crew, about the air. She started eating more, then exercising in her cell. At first, the guards laughed at her. They thought she was trying to stay in shape. Then they noticed something strange. The gravity in her cell was higher than normal, a malfunction the engineers forgot to fix. She had been training under triple gravity. By accident, and she was smiling. Dr. Varnock had lost sleep over that smile. It wasn't the smile of a prisoner. It was the smile of someone who was preparing. Someone who knew something was coming. Surak sat in the command room, staring at a screen showing Subject 004 doing push-ups with one arm. Her vitals were stable. Her body temperature had dropped slightly, but instead of hypothermia, her muscles showed signs of increased output. The AI logged the change. Performance enhancement detected. Estimated physical strength, 162% above human baseline. Cause, environmental adaptation. Surak rubbed his temples. She's adapting to our ship, like it's a training ground. Varnock entered, holding a datapad with trembling hands. We've seen this in other species, he said. Adaptation under stress. Evolution over centuries. He looked up, but not like this, not this fast. Surak leaned forward. What do you mean? Varnock placed the pad down. They're not just evolving over generations. Their bodies are rewriting themselves now, while we watch. While we test. He tapped the pad. It's like they were built for war. Surak stared at the footage again. All 3 subjects, 001, 004, 005, were showing improvements that were not just biological, they were strategic. One had memorized the guard rotation schedule. Another had mimicked the alien language within 4 days. But it was more than that. They were learning each other, collaborating, without speaking. 1. Guard had noticed Subject 001 tapping on the wall of his cell in a strange rhythm. At first, They thought it was random. Then Subject 005 tapped back, same rhythm. Different pace. It wasn't random. It was code. And they had invented it without being taught. Now the question that haunted the crew wasn't what are they doing. It was how far will they go? On the 11th night, a storm hit the ship. Not a natural one, a magnetic storm from a rogue planet's field. Power was low. Systems were unstable. Many doors lost security lock. Lights flickered across several sectors. In that window, Subject 004 stopped her exercises. She stood still, eyes closed, breathing steady. Then she pressed her hands against the wall. When the guard passed by, she looked him dead in the eyes and whispered, "We're learning faster than you can stop us." The guard laughed nervously until the scanner beeped. She had increased muscle density again, and her reflex time had dropped by 0.3 seconds. She was faster, stronger, sharper, and no one had given her anything. They took away food. She burned fat into fuel. They raised the temperature. She began sweating less. They fed her alien toxins. Her body filtered them in hours. Nothing was working. They were breaking every rule of known science. Surak gathered the science officers that night. "We thought they were at their limits," he said. "But the truth is, humans don't have limits. Not the way we do." Silence filled the room. He continued, "Our kind evolves when nature forces us to. When we face extinction, we adapt, slowly. But these creatures, they treat every experience like evolution. Pain becomes fuel. Hunger becomes strategy. Weakness becomes strength." Someone in the room whispered, "What are they becoming?" No one answered. Because deep down, they already knew. They were becoming a new version of themselves, built from everything the aliens had thrown at them. Each injury was a lesson, each experiment a challenge. Each setback, a step forward. Subject 001 had grown quieter, more focused. Subject 004 had become bolder. Subject 005 had stopped pretending to be afraid. And the worst part? There were only 3 of them on the ship. Earth had billions more. That same night, Subject 004 stood by the wall of her chamber, staring up at the small ventilation shaft. She whispered to herself, "One more day." She didn't say it with hope. She said it with certainty, because she wasn't just planning to escape. She was planning to win. Something was wrong with the silence. It wasn't the usual comfortable quiet of a ship at rest. This silence was heavy, like something was watching, waiting, like a storm holding its breath before it breaks everything. The crew of Zar had stopped walking near the human containment chambers. The guards no longer laughed. Scientists spoke in whispers. Doors were checked twice. Lights were left on, even in sleep quarters. Fear had entered the ship. It wasn't loud, but it was everywhere. And strangely, the humans felt it too, but they didn't seem afraid. They looked stronger, more alert. Almost calm. Subject 001 sat with his back to the cold metal wall, legs crossed, eyes closed. His face showed no tension. He wasn't meditating. He was thinking, listening, feeling. Dr. Varnock watched from the observation deck, arms folded tightly. "He hasn't slept in 36 hours, he said to Captain Surak, who stood beside him. "Surak, check the monitor. That's not possible. He should be collapsing." "He's not tired," Varnock whispered. "He's focused." That word, focused, didn't belong to a prisoner. It belonged to a warrior. Down in Sector B, Subject 004 had begun pacing in her chamber, not out of boredom, but rhythmically. 6 steps forward, pause, 6 steps back. Her hands moved with each step, fingers twitching like they were feeling something invisible. The guards thought she was losing her mind. But one technician saw the pattern. She was mimicking troop movements, not alien troops, human ones, from footage they had shown her during psychological evaluations. She had memorized every formation. The aliens had thought it would intimidate her. It didn't. It inspired her. And that's when the crew realized something terrifying. Humans didn't fear fear. They used it. Every creature the aliens had ever studied had a breaking point, a moment when the mind said enough and the body followed. Fear was the lever. Push it hard enough and any being would collapse. But not these creatures. They stared at fear, laughed at it, and sometimes became stronger because of it. Subject 005 was placed in the isolation chamber, the worst psychological test zone on the ship. It showed the subject their worst fears using neural projection and memory playback. No one had lasted longer than 7 minutes without screaming. Subject 005 sat in there for 1 full hour. When they pulled him out, he looked pale, shaken. His heartbeat was double. His muscles were tight, but he smiled, a slow, eerie smile. And then he said something that froze the med lab. That was good. I needed to feel that again. Dr. Varnock reviewed the footage personally. The fear simulation showed the destruction of the subject's home, his family, his people. It should have broken him. Instead, he used it. Surak slammed the monitor shut. He enjoyed it. Varnock didn't look up. He fed on it. Like it gave him strength. The captain paced, his hands clenched. No creature should work like this. Varnock finally turned to him. No creature does. That's what makes them dangerous. Pain makes them smarter. Stress makes them evolve, and fear. He paused. Fear makes them faster. That night, the AI systems detected a strange rhythm in the human heart rates. They weren't just surviving, they were sinking, like a beat, like soldiers before battle. Every scan showed increased adrenaline, not from terror, but from readiness. They wanted something to happen. Subject 004 stared into the camera and spoke her first words in days. Stop trying to scare us. We've lived with fear since we were children. We're not running from it. She stepped closer to the glass, her voice calm. We carry it. We use it. Somewhere deep inside the ship, the lights flickered. Another storm was approaching, the cosmic kind. But this time, the crew didn't care about the weather outside. They were scared of the war building inside. Surak ordered every human to be sedated. All 3 were hit with the strongest tranquilizers allowed by alien law. Subject 001 stayed still for 2 minutes, then his heartbeat slowed, then rose again. Then he opened his eyes, wide awake. Alert. He stood up. The guards panicked. One hit the emergency nerve blaster. Subject 001 fell, screaming. The pain level should have shut down his brain. But he crawled forward, face down, clawing at the ground with his fingernails. His voice came through the speakers, hoarse and broken, but clear. You're not the first to hurt us. You won't be the last. And then he passed out, but even unconscious, his body was still resisting. Heart rate stable. Brain activity rising. Muscles tensing. He was dreaming of fighting. Training and sleep. Varnock shut down the monitor. They're not afraid, he whispered. Surak stared at him. Then what are they? Varnock looked at the glass, his face pale. They are what fear makes, when it doesn't destroy you. There were no more tests. After that, the aliens stopped trying. They didn't want to see what happened if the humans got even stronger, but it was already too late. The fear they had tried to use had only made them sharper. And now, that fear was moving through the ship like a virus. But the humans? They weren't infected by it. They were becoming it. Asterisk, the ship's metal corridors were no longer a place of safety. They felt like traps now, long, quiet, suffocating. No one walked alone anymore. No one dared turn their back on the containment chambers. And even though the humans were still technically locked inside, the crew of Zar had stopped feeling like jailers. They felt like test subjects, and they didn't like what they were learning. It started when Subject 005 requested a puzzle. At first, it seemed harmless. He had asked for something to do. and a low-level officer gave him an alien logic cube, a simple toy meant to confuse most non-native species. It had no language, just patterns and logic gates that opened in sequence. Subject 005 solved it in less than 3 minutes. That wasn't what shocked them. What shocked them was that he solved it without ever having seen it before. He had no reference, no translator, no knowledge of the cube's rules, but he learned them instantly. The next day, Subject 004 was caught using a spoon to shape a piece of wall insulation into a small carving of the ship's main hallway. Not a guess, a perfect model. Every vent, every camera, every blind spot. She hadn't left her cell in weeks. They checked her cell feed again and again. She had built the map from memory, from tiny reflections in the glass, from echoes, from light. Subject 001 was next. After a round of intense nerve stimulation, a cruel test designed to measure pain tolerance, he had collapsed, unconscious, but not broken. 4 hours later, he woke up, not screaming, not confused. He began asking questions not about his cell, or the ship, or the guards. He asked about the experiment settings. He asked for data. He asked what the voltage was, what the waveform pattern looked like, how long the pulses lasted. Varnock had laughed at first. "You want the science behind your torture?" Subject 001 smiled through cracked lips. "If I understand the pain," he said, "it can't control." It was more than strange behavior. It was evolution, intelligent adaptation. Every time the humans were hurt, their brains lit up. Not like pain centers, but like puzzle solvers. Their neurons fired faster. They made connections quicker. Their memories became sharper. Like pain wasn't breaking them, it was building them. Sirach stood in the command deck, watching silent footage of Subject 004, drawing something on her wall with her fingernails. He enhanced the video. It was math. Alien math. Equations, based on gravitational fields. Varnok stood beside him, silent. Finally he said, "We've stopped testing them." Sirach glanced over. "What do you mean?" "They're testing us now." It was true. Subject 005 had started asking about the language used by the AI core. He'd begun writing alien glyphs using food paste on the floor. The patterns made no sense at first. Then someone noticed he was writing questions, grammatical questions. About the alien tongue. He was teaching himself a new language, and doing it under constant pain stimuli. Each time he was shocked, he learned faster. Each punishment seemed to fuel his learning. He wasn't resisting pain, he was using it. Sirach turned to Varnock. "How is that possible?" Varnock didn't answer at first. Then he pulled up old files. Human records. Data taken from Earth's intercepted signals, their history, their wars, their stories. He opened one file labeled Human Conflict World War Archives. Varnock pointed at the screen. "They've survived worse than this. They've burned their own cities, fought each other with fire and poison and metal. Their history isn't clean, it's blood. And every time, they got smarter." He pointed again, this time to Subject 1's brain scan. Every scan shows increased neuroplasticity after pain exposure. Their brains are rewiring to handle it better. Not just tolerate it, understand it, control it. The pain we thought would break them is making them faster. The captain leaned over the console, eyes narrowing. "So we hurt them, and they learn. We stress them, and they grow." He looked up. "What happens if we stop?" The answer came faster than expected, because they didn't stop. Subject 004 faked a seizure. It fooled the guards. They ran in, 2 at once, standard procedure. She struck fast, one knee to the jaw, a grab, a twist. The second guard reacted, but too late. She didn't kill. She didn't even run. She took a shock baton and pressed it to her own neck and screamed. Alarms rang. She was taken down hard by 5 guards, put into lockdown, but in the med bay later, the report was clear. Neural response accelerated, reflexes increased. Oxygen efficiency up 19%. The pain she chose made her stronger. Not just physically. She learned how the baton worked, how the guards moved, how fast the response time was, and then she gave herself that pain again. To speed up her understanding. Subject 001 said it clearly the next day, while staring into the camera with cold, sharp eyes. We don't fear pain. We listen to it. He leaned closer. Every time you hurt us, we learn you. The crew finally understood. They hadn't found a weak species. They had found something else. Something rare. Something terrifying. Humans didn't just survive pain. They grew from it, like it was part of their design. The ships I made a final report at the end of that cycle. Subjects display advanced adaptive intelligence under duress. Intelligence increases after trauma. Threat potential rising. It gave a recommendation. Cease testing. Begin negotiations. But the crew wasn't ready for that. And the humans. They were still learning. Asterisk in the stillness of deep space. The research ship Tsar floated like a silent grave. Nothing outside moved. But inside, something was changing. The humans weren't escaping anymore. They were studying, and that's when the crew realized they had made a mistake. A big one. They thought they were observing wild animals. Creatures of muscle and instinct. They never expected their test subjects to become students. But that's exactly what was happening. Subject 1 had stopped reacting to pain. Not because he couldn't feel it, but because he understood it. When the nerve implant sent shock pulses through his spine, he flinched exactly once. Then never again. Every response after that was calculated, like he was mapping the system in real time. He knew how long the shocks lasted. He knew the intervals between pulses. He even knew how far the guard stood when they activated it. Was learning the rules. Subject 004 had developed a new habit, blinking patterns toward the camera. At first, the staff thought it was random. Then a junior technician checked the footage frame by frame. The pattern matched an old Earth code, Morse code. They were sending messages. The humans weren't just adapting to pain or fear anymore. They were adapting to the ship. Subject 005 started tapping a rhythm on the floor. Metal against metal. The guards heard it daily and grew annoyed. Shut that thing up, one shouted. But one engineer recognized the beat. It was the startup chime of the ship's central AI core. The human had heard it once, just once, when the core rebooted after a power glitch. And now he was repeating it. Perfectly. Not as noise. As communication. Dr. Varnock reviewed the logs that night. His hands trembled as he swiped through screen after screen. Subjects 001, 004, and 005 had never shared a room. They never saw each other. They never spoke. And still, they were working together, coordinating without words, thinking in sync. How? Surok stared at the data and said what no one wanted to hear. They're not learning individually anymore. They're learning as a group. That changed everything. Most intelligent species grow stronger through experience. But humans? They grow stronger through observation, through imitation. Through strategy. They had watched the crew closely, studied guard movements. Recorded shift times, noted blinking lights, door sounds, power cycles, and even the food tray schedule. Subject 004 had broken her tray once, on purpose. Why? To test how fast the crew responded to waste disposal. She was tracking reaction times. Subject 1 began speaking only during certain power cycles, when the ship's background noise was at its loudest. He was hiding sound, not just talking. Planning. Subject 5 had drawn the ship's door lock symbol, using leftover food. Exactly. Perfectly. He understood the system now. And then came the breach. It wasn't loud. No alarms. No smashed glass. Just silence. And then the screen flickered. Varnock was reviewing data when it happened. A short message blinked on the lab monitor, written in clean, clear alien script. "We see you now." No one had taught them the language. The crew hadn't spoken it out. Loud. It was used only in internal systems, command menus, and private transmissions. Yet there it was, typed by human fingers. "We see you now." Panic spread. Every chamber was checked, but the humans were still there. Still inside. Still chained. Still watching. But everything felt different. Now, because the aliens realized this wasn't an escape attempt, this was a study. The Tsar wasn't a prison anymore. It was a school. And the humans were top of the class. Subject 004 asked for a pen. When denied, she chewed her food tray into a sharp point and used it to draw diagrams on her wall. One of them showed the ship's energy core. Not just a sketch, a blueprint. She had never seen the core. She had only felt the heat through the walls, calculated the pulse. Heard the hum, and built the image in her mind. Subject 005 refused food for 2 days, not as protest, but to test how long he could function under starvation. He recorded the effects on his body using symbols scratched into the metal floor. Pain had become a lesson. Starvation, an experiment. Subject 001 pretended to sleep for 4 hours, vitals flat, breathing slow, just enough to trick the eye into lowering monitoring settings. During that time, he whispered into his blanket, his words caught only by a low-level frequency recorder. "Main control is above deck 3. Guard shift changes every 6 hours. Core vents cycle every 11. We go on the 13th pulse." He was planning, and he wasn't planning alone. The guards didn't see monsters anymore. They saw engineers. Soldiers. Analysts. Sir, okay, shut off the camera feeds and leaned over the console. "We didn't capture them," he whispered. "We invited them in." Varnock nodded slowly. "They're not just escaping this ship. They're learning how to build their own." That night, all 3 humans were sedated, triple dose, strapped down, locked in reinforced chambers, and still. Subject 004 smiled before closing her eyes. Because they weren't afraid. They weren't even angry. They were simply ready. Asterisk. The ship Tsar was silent. Not because of damage, not because of death, but because no one knew what to say anymore. Every system was online. The lights worked. The air was clean. The engines hummed gently. But still, it felt like the ship was sinking, and it was, not physically, but in fear. For the first time in centuries, the crew didn't feel like the most advanced species in the galaxy. They felt small. Weak. Outsmarted. That the humans hadn't escaped. They didn't need to. They had already won. And now, everyone on board could feel it. It began with a signal, a soft repeated ping inside the ship's private comms. Not from Earth, not from another alien ship. From inside. The signal repeated 3 words. In perfect alien language. "Stand down, now." Captain Suruk stared at the message as it looped on screen. How the hell are they inside our channels? Varnock didn't answer. His hands were shaking too hard to type. The message wasn't coming from any console. It wasn't bouncing off the external antennas. It was routed through the life support system, a place no communication should exist. Unless someone had built a system inside the ship's own core, someone who had been watching. Studying. Waiting. Subject 001 had been silent for 2 days. Too silent. He lay still in his chamber, eyes closed, arms folded. The guards thought he was sleeping. He wasn't. He was listening, every vibration in the wall, every footstep outside, every sigh, every click, every flicker of energy. He didn't need sight anymore. He knew the ship by feel. Subject 04 was still drawing. Only now, she wasn't sketching ship parts or escape routes. She was sketching alien faces, each crew member, one by one. And every face had a red line across it, not a threat. A record. They knew who was where. And what they had done. Subject 005 had stopped, moving altogether, but his vitals were climbing, higher and higher. Brain activity at 230%. Heart rate stable, muscles twitching. Like he was dreaming of war. He was preparing. Surak stood in the command deck surrounded by senior officers. The lights above flickered again. Not because of damage, but because something was drawing more power from the ship's core. No one knew what it was. Varnak pulled up. Diagnostics. No viruses. No intrusions. But there was a code buried deep inside the engine log. One line. We are awake. Surak whispered. They've taken the ship. No one argued, because they all knew. This was no longer a lab. It was a lesson. And the lesson was almost over. At 0400 hours. The entire ship stopped for 2.6 seconds. Just a pause. Nothing exploded. No alarms. Just stillness. A breath. And then, from the speakers across every room, engineering, command, crew quarters, came a voice. Not human. Not alien. A blend. The language was theirs, but the tone, it was human. Familiar. Sharp. Unforgiving. You were warned. Every crew member froze. The voice continued. You captured us. You heard us. You studied us like beasts. Subject 001 appeared on the main view screen. Standing in his cell, completely still. Not chained, the restraints were open. Not broken, the bruises were gone. He stared directly into the camera, but we're not beasts. The lights dimmed. We learn, we adapt, we wait. Footage began to play across every monitor. Not from the ship's records, from human-made cameras. Somehow downloaded, extracted. It showed Earth's wars, fires, collapsed cities, screaming soldiers running into hopeless battles. And winning. Then came footage of space, rockets, ships primitive but bold. It ended on one simple sentence, written in both languages. You survived peace. We survived everything else. Varnak collapsed into his chair, whispering to himself. They're not just survivors. They're evolution with teeth. Surak stood, eyes wide, unable to breathe. It was all clear now. The humans had never planned to escape. They had planned to learn. And now, they had learned enough. Subject 004 looked into the security cam, her face calm. We didn't come to destroy you. She smiled, not cruelly, but like a parent talking to a child who had made a dangerous mistake. We came to teach you. The ship lights flickered again, then went dark, for 10 full seconds. When they came back, every human was gone from their cells. Gone. No doors broken. No alarms triggered. Just vanished. Then came the final transmission. A black screen, white text, and a single voice. We were never prisoners. We were your test, and this was your last warning. The screen went dark. The silence returned, but this time it was permanent. No trace of the humans remained. No sign of how they escaped, just 3 empty chambers, and fear that would never leave the ship again. Months later, the Tsar was found drifting near a dead star, systems intact but crew mentally broken. They spoke in whispers, never above a hush. No one laughed anymore. No one said primitive again, and when someone asked what happened, what species did this, the answer was always the same. 3 simple words. Don't touch Earth.